Right, we are going to start the purpose approach of statutory interpretation. So last class we covered literal golden rule, and we will look at the purpose approach, and then we'll have a look at the rules of grammar and other stuff. Now, can you take notes? The purposive approach of statutory interpretation is an element of the European Union which originated in the civil law countries of the continental Europe, of the European continent. The European continent. Judges in English law never applied the purposive approach. Never applied the purposive approach. But the accession to European Union, has changed the scenario, and it became a matter of debate for English judges whether to apply the purposive approach under the purposive approach. Judges look at the purpose of the legislation. Judges look at the purpose of the legislation. So look at the purpose of the legislation. Or the purpose behind inclusion of a provision in a statute. So, English judiciary was quite reluctant. English judiciary was quite reluctant to apply this except Lord Denning, who in In Northman PLC versus London Borough of Barnet. In Northman PLC versus London Borough of Barnet. Barnet expressed his willingness to apply the purposive approach as he felt that it was a reality of English law. To apply this new approach of statutory interpretation. To apply this new approach of statutory interpretation. However, the House of Lords in Northman rejected Lord Daling's approach. Rejected Lord Daling's approach. Full stop. The House of Lords preferred to apply the purposive approach in the interpretation of international treaties and conventions. In the interpretation of international treaties and conventions. International treaties and conventions. In Fothergill versus Monarch Airlines. Full stop. In Pitstone versus Freeman's PLC. The House of Lords moved closer to the purposive approach. As it applied as it agreed to apply the purposive approach to interpret laws giving effect to European Union laws. So the House felt that otherwise it would be in violation of the treaty obligations of United Kingdom. This principle was further applied in Lister versus Fort Drydock. Lister versus Fort Drydock. F48, Fort Drydock. New paragraph. At last, the House of Lords agreed to apply the purposive approach in pure domestic legislations. In the case of paper versus heart, full stop. In this case, the House of Lords held that in order to find out the true intention of the Parliament, true intention of the Parliament, the purposive approach can be used. The purposive approach can be used in the interpretation of legislations dealing with purely domestic matters. In pure domestic matters. Full stop. The House further stated that Hansard can be used. Remember Hansard? What is Hansard? Hansard can be used as an extrinsic instrument of statutory interpretation. Act as an extrinsic, E-X-T-R-I-N-S-I-C, extrinsic. Extrinsic instrument of statutory interpretation. As an extrinsic instrument of statutory interpretation, to find out the true meaning of it. Interestingly, the House of Lords applied the purposive approach long before the paper versus heart. In the case of R versus P, in the case of R versus P, for the interpretation of section 17(3) of the Juries Act 1974, for the interpretation of section 17(3) of the Juries Act 1974. Section 17(3) of the Juries Act 1974. In this case, the House of Lords held that it is the substance of the requirement of a provision which has to be complied with rather than the precise form of words by which such compliance can be achieved. Now, let me explain this. I think in order to understand the purposive approach, R versus P is the best example. A very interesting name, isn't it? Someone's name to P. I always wonder how he introduced himself.
I know.
Yes, or how he picked up his phone, saying that hello, Pete speaking. so that's, or he had to, probably he had to clarify himself. This is Pete with a double G. So that's a very interesting name. Anyway, now you see what is there in section 17(3) of the Juries Act. Section 17(3) deals with the majority verdicts. Remember the jury verdicts? You know, there are 12 laypersons involved in a jury. There can be two types of verdicts. One is the majority verdict, one is the unanimous verdict. Now, there is no problem with the unanimous verdict because this is 12A. But the majority verdict cannot be anything but 11-1. Okay, even if it is 10-2, it will have to be a retrial. Okay, that's the rule. Now, section 17, subsection 3 of the Juries Act states that any, when the jury is giving the majority verdict, the foreman of the jury must clearly inform the court how many agreed and how many disagreed. Which means, if I am the foreman of the jury, who is the foreman? The sort of the leader, of the 12 men present there. He's like the the one who can, more like a spokesperson. Okay. Now, the foreman of the jury must tell that it is a majority verdict where 11 agreed and 1 disagreed. Now, this is a clearly statutory format. Statute clearly states that you must mention how many agreed and how many disagreed. Now, there was a case before R versus P, which was named is R versus Reynolds. In Reynolds, what happened? The foreman mentioned that it was a majority verdict, mentioned that while 11 of us agreed that the defendant is guilty, but did not mention that 1 disagreed. And the very intelligent defense counsel appealed against that verdict, saying that it is a violation where statutory procedure was not followed. Now think about it. If we apply the literal rule, what we have to do? We go by the book, isn't it? If we apply the literal rule, we have to say, well, the conviction should be overturned because the statutory procedure was not properly followed. And interestingly, the Court of Appeal did that in R versus Reynolds. A similar thing happened in R versus P. The case went up to House of Lords because Court of Appeal already had a precedent there, so they had to follow it. The case went up to the House of Lords on this point, that what should we do here? Now the House of Lords, R versus P was decided back in 1982, which means almost 82-83, which means almost 8 years before the paper versus Hart scenario. Okay, in R versus P, the House of Lords said, look, why this provision is there? The provision to mention how many agreed and how many disagreed is to make it clear to everybody that out of the 12, 11 agreed and 1 disagreed. The House of Lords said we do not have to do it literally. If out of 12, if we say that 11 agreed, then arithmetically it is clear that 1 other disagreed. And that satisfies the requirement of the provision. So here in R versus P, what did the House of Lords do? Did the House of Lords apply the literal rule or it applied the purposive rule? It applied the purposive rule. It said that we are not going to look at the literal meaning of it, we are going to look at the purposive purpose of the legislation. What was the purpose of this provision? The purpose of the provision was to clarify how many agreed and how many disagreed, and that's it. We are not looking at anything else. Are we clear? What do we do in purposive approach? Everyone? Yes. No doubt so far, right? Good, great. So I'm ending the class here. In our next class, we are going to look at the rules of grammar. I need a little time there, and we are going to look at the some of the things what we call the. Give me a second. The presumptions of statutory interpretation. We are going to look at the rules of grammar and we are going to look at the presumptions of statutory interpretation. And once we are done with those, I think we should be comfortable with statutory interpretation. Yes. Okay? And we are going to have the class, if not Thursday, then on Friday. All right? I have a question. Yes. So I end the class here. Thank you.